The signal that changed everything. The observation deck of the celestial horizon hummed with the gentle vibration of the ship's engines as Dr. Mira Castellanos stared at the cascading data on her screen. For 3 years, she had listened to the void between stars, searching for patterns in the cosmic static that most people considered nothing more than background noise. Tonight, that patience was about to pay off in ways she couldn't imagine. "Mira, you should get some sleep," her colleague Jensen called from across the cramped monitoring station. "We've been at this for 16 hours straight." She waved him off without looking up, her eyes locked on the frequency spectrum that had just spiked in a way that made her heart race. The signal was faint, buried beneath layers of stellar radiation and quantum interference, but it was there. And it was repeating. "Jensen, come look at this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He shuffled over, coffee in hand, expecting another false alarm. The universe was full of them. Pulsars mimicked intelligence. Quasars sang songs that sounded almost deliberate. But when he saw the pattern on her screen, the coffee cup slipped from his fingers and shattered on the metal floor. The signal pulsed in perfect mathematical intervals. Prime numbers. Fibonacci sequences. Ratios that could only be artificial. And beneath it all, a carrier wave modulated with what looked like compressed information, terabytes of it, streaming from a point in space 37 light-years away. That's first contact," Jensen breathed. Myra's hands trembled as she initiated the automated protocols, sending alerts to the United Earth Space Command and every major research institution in the solar system. Within minutes, her console lit up with incoming calls from admirals, scientists, and politicians. She ignored them all, focusing instead on isolating the signal and running it through the translation algorithms that humanity had spent decades developing for this exact moment. The algorithms choked on the data. Whatever language or code the signal used, it was beyond anything in the databases. Mira switched to raw analysis, looking for visual or mathematical patterns that might offer a clue. Hours blurred together as she worked, Jensen at her side, both of them aware that they were witnessing the most important moment in human history. Then, at 0347 hours ship time, the computer beeped. A single frame had been extracted from the signal. An image. Mira opened the file, and her breath caught in her throat. It was a star map, but not like any she had ever seen. Three-dimensional, rotating, marked with symbols that pulsed in different colors. At the center was a yellow star that she recognized immediately as Sol. Earth's sun. Surrounding it were dozens of other stars, each connected by lines that suggested routes or relationships. But it was the outer edge of the map that made her blood run cold. There, in stark red, was a boundary line. And beyond it, darkness. Not the darkness of empty space, but something else. Something that seemed to absorb light in the rendering, as if the map itself was warning them. "What are we looking at?" Jensen asked. Before Mira could answer, the signal changed. The mathematical patterns dissolved, replaced by a new sequence that her computer recognized instantly as a countdown. 30 Earth days. 720 hours. 43,200 minutes. And then, embedded in the countdown, a single repeating phrase in a language the algorithms suddenly understood. It was crude, assembled from fragments of humanity's own broadcasts that had leaked into space over the past century, but the message was clear. They are coming. Prepare. You are not alone. The observation deck fell silent except for the hum of the engines. Mira stared at the countdown, watching it tick down second by second. Whoever had sent this signal had been watching Earth for a long time. Long enough to learn fragments of human language. Long enough to know where humanity was in the galaxy. And long enough to know that something was coming for them. "We need to decrypt the rest of this," Mira said, her voice steady despite the fear coiling in her chest. "If someone went to this much trouble to warn us, then whatever's in that signal might be the key to our survival." Jensen nodded, already pulling up additional processing power from the ship's mainframe. Around them, the celestial horizon drifted through the void, carrying the first message from an alien intelligence. A message that was equal parts greeting and warning. As Mira dove back into the data, she couldn't shake the feeling that humanity had just been handed both a gift and a curse. Out there, somewhere among the stars, someone was watching. Someone wanted them to survive. But survival, she was learning, came with a price. The countdown continued. 29 days, 23 hours, 56 minutes. And the real work was just beginning. The Council of Worlds. The emergency summit convened in Geneva 3 days after the signal was confirmed. Mira stood before a semicircle of the most powerful people on Earth, her hands clasped behind her back to hide their shaking. The UN Security Council chambers had been retrofitted with holographic displays that now showed the alien star map rotating slowly above the assembly floor, its red boundary line pulsing like a warning beacon. Dr. Castellanos, the Secretary General began, her voice echoing through the vast chamber, "You're telling us that we have less than 4 weeks before, what, exactly?" Mira took a breath. "We don't know, Madam Secretary. The signal contains over 600 terabytes of compressed data. We've barely scratched the surface. But what we have decoded suggests that the boundary you see on this map represents a zone of control. Territory claimed by something the senders call the Dominion." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Admiral Chen of the Pacific Fleet leaned forward, his weathered face grim. "And Earth is inside this zone?" "No, Admiral. We're outside it. For now." Mira gestured to the map, and a section zoomed in to show Seoul highlighted in yellow. "But the countdown suggests that's about to change. The Dominion is expanding, and we're directly in their path." The Russian ambassador stood abruptly. "How do we know this isn't a hoax? Some elaborate prank or psychological operation?" Mira had expected this. She pulled up another display, showing the mathematical precision of the signal's origin point and the energy requirements necessary to broadcast it across 37 light-years. The signal would require a power output equivalent to a medium-sized star. No human technology can produce that. This is real. For a moment, the chamber fell silent. Then the questions came in a flood. How many of them were there? What did they want? Could humanity fight? Could they run? Mira answered what she could, but the truth was that most of her responses were variations of, "We don't know yet." It was the Chinese premier who asked the question that changed everything. "Dr. Castellanos, you said, senders, plural. Who sent this warning, and why would they help us?" Mira nodded, grateful for the opening. "That's the critical piece we decoded yesterday." She brought up a new image, and the assembly gasped collectively. It was a photograph, or something like it. A gathering of beings so diverse that it seemed impossible they could exist in the same room. Some were humanoid, others insectoid, crystalline, or shapes that defied easy description. They stood together in what looked like a massive hall, and at the center of the image was a symbol, a circle containing stars of different colors, linked by lines identical to those on the star map. "They call themselves the Accord," Mira explained. "A coalition of civilizations that exists outside Dominion space. According to the data we've translated, they've been fighting a holding action against the Dominion's expansion for over 3,000 years. They sent this signal because they've learned that the Dominion considers primitive species like us to be resources. Raw materials for their war machine." Admiral Chen's jaw tightened. "Primitive? In galactic terms, yes. We've barely left our own solar system. We have no faster-than-light travel, no energy weapons beyond theoretical models, no experience with interstellar conflict." Mira met his gaze steadily. "But the Accord believes we have something valuable. Something that might change the balance." "And what's that?" the Secretary General asked. Mira pulled up the final decoded file, and text scrolled across the holographic displays in 24 languages. "They've been studying our broadcasts for decades. Our history, our cultures, our conflicts. And they say that humans possess a quality rare in the galaxy, adaptability. We're survivors. We don't give up, even when facing impossible odds. They think that if they give us the tools and knowledge, we might be able to hold our section of the line. Buy them time to mount a larger defense. The Premier leaned back in his chair. So we're being recruited. We're being given a choice, Mira corrected. The full database includes technical specifications for defensive shields, energy weapons, and something they call a translation matrix that will let us communicate with Accord species. They're offering to help us survive. But they're also clear that survival isn't guaranteed. The Dominion has conquered hundreds of worlds. We would be facing an enemy that has been perfecting warfare for millennia. The chamber erupted into argument. Some delegates called for immediate acceptance of the Accord's offer. Others demanded caution, suggesting it might be a trap. A few argued that humanity should try to negotiate with the Dominion instead, offering submission in exchange for survival. It was Admiral Chen who cut through the noise, his voice like iron. 27 days. That's all we have. If we're going to do this, we need to start now. Every hour we debate is an hour we're not preparing. The Secretary-General raised her hand, and silence fell. She looked at Mira, then at the rotating star map with its red boundary line creeping closer. Dr. Castellanos, in your professional opinion, what happens if we do nothing? Mira didn't hesitate. Based on the historical records in the database, the Dominion doesn't negotiate. They don't take prisoners. When they arrive, they strip worlds of resources and conscript any survivors into their labor forces. Earth would be processed. We'd cease to exist as a civilization. The Secretary-General closed her eyes for a long moment. When she opened them, they were hard with resolve. Then we don't have a choice at all. We fight. She turned to the assembly. All in favor of accepting the Accord's assistance and beginning immediate preparation. The vote was unanimous. As the delegates filed out to begin the monumental task of preparing humanity for its first interstellar war, Mira remained behind, staring at the star map. Somewhere out there, beyond the red boundary line, the Dominion was coming. And somewhere else, the Accord was watching, hoping that humanity would prove worthy of the faith they'd placed in Earth's children. 27 days. Not enough time to build an army. Not enough time to master alien technology. But maybe, just maybe, enough time to show the galaxy what humans were made of. The countdown continued. The day we stood together. The sky above New York City shimmered with an aurora that had nothing to do with solar winds. Mira stood on the observation platform of the newly constructed defense grid, watching as the translated Accord technology hummed to life around the planet. 24 days. That's how long humanity had to transform from a single-world species into something that could face an interstellar threat. It shouldn't have been possible. But humans had always excelled at the impossible when their backs were against the wall. Around the globe, factories that once built cars and computers have been retooled to produce energy shields and plasma capacitors. The Accord's database had been distributed to every nation, every research institution, every engineer who volunteered to help. Language barriers dissolved as the translation matrix allowed scientists from Beijing to collaborate seamlessly with counterparts in Sao Paulo and Mumbai. Old rivalries were set aside. Political borders became meaningless. For the first time in human history, Earth spoke with one voice. "Doctor, we're getting readings," Jensen called from his station inside the command center. His face had aged years in the past 3 weeks, but his eyes burned with determination. "They're here." Myra's heart hammered as she moved to the display. The detection grid, a network of satellites enhanced with Accord sensor technology, showed multiple contacts emerging from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system. Dozens of them. Each one broadcasting the energy signature the Accord database had identified as Dominion warships. Admiral Chen's voice crackled over the command frequency. "All stations, this is Fleet Command. Enemy contacts confirmed. Execute Defense Protocol Unity." Across Earth's orbit, the defense platforms activated. Humanity had built 47 of them, massive structures bristling with weapons that would have seemed like science fiction a month ago. They weren't elegant. The design was crude, cobbled together from Accord blueprints and human ingenuity. But they worked. The Dominion fleet advanced with the cold precision of a species that had never known defeat. Their ships were sleek, organic-looking things that moved like predators. As they crossed the orbit of Mars, they deployed smaller craft, swarms of fighters that streaked toward Earth like locusts. "Here they come," Mira whispered. The first Dominion fighters hit Earth's outer defense perimeter and met a wall of coordinated fire. Plasma cannons that humanity had learned to build in record time lit up the void. Missiles equipped with Accord guidance systems tracked targets with impossible accuracy. The shields, shimmering barriers of contained energy that wrapped around the defense platforms, absorbed incoming fire and redistributed it harmlessly into space. But the Dominion didn't slow. They poured through the gaps, overwhelming defenses through sheer numbers. 3 platforms went dark in the first exchange, their shields collapsing under sustained bombardment. Thousands of human defenders died in those moments, but their sacrifice bought time for the others to adjust, to learn the enemy's tactics and adapt. And adapt they did. A fighter squadron from the African Union executed a maneuver that wasn't in any Accord tactical manual, using Earth's gravity well to slingshot behind the Dominion formation and strike their command ship's engines. The tactic worked. The massive warship lurched, its formation disrupted. In orbit above Asia, a defense platform commander named Yuki Tanaka made a split-second decision that would be studied for generations. She dropped her station's shields and diverted all power to weapons, unleashing a barrage that vaporized an entire wing of Dominion fighters before they could reach the surface. Her platform was destroyed seconds later, but the gap she created allowed evacuation shuttles from Tokyo to reach safety. The battle raged for 6 hours. The Dominion had superior technology and centuries of combat experience. But they had never faced an enemy like humanity. They had never fought a species that refused to accept defeat even when every rational calculation said they should. Mira monitored the battle from the command center, coordinating with engineers who were making real-time modifications to weapon systems based on battlefield data. A researcher in Geneva discovered that Dominion shields were vulnerable to a specific frequency of electromagnetic pulse. Within minutes, that information was distributed to every platform, every ship, every fighter pilot. The tide began to turn. Admiral Chen, commanding from the bridge of the Defiant, Earth's first purpose-built warship, led a strike force directly at the Dominion flagship. The attack was desperate, almost suicidal, but it embodied everything the Accord had seen in humanity. The willingness to risk everything for a chance at victory. The flagship's shields collapsed under the concentrated assault. Chen's final transmission before his ship was destroyed was simple: for Earth. The Dominion flagship broke apart in a cascade of secondary explosions. Without their command ship, the remaining Dominion forces hesitated. It was only a moment, a fraction of a second, but it was enough. The human forces pressed their advantage, driving the invaders back with a ferocity that bordered on madness. And then, impossibly, the Dominion fleet withdrew. They jumped back into faster-than-light travel, retreating toward the red boundary line on the star map. Humanity had done what hundreds of other species had failed to do. They had made the Dominion bleed. They had made them afraid. As the last enemy contact vanished from the sensors, the command center erupted in cheers. Mira collapsed into her chair, tears streaming down her face. They had won. Not without terrible cost. The casualty reports were still coming in, and entire cities had been damaged by debris from the orbital battle, but they had won. A new transmission arrived from deep space. The Accord's response was brief: "Welcome to the Coalition, children of Earth. Your courage has been noted. Your voice will be heard. The galaxy is large, and the fight is far from over. But today, you proved that humanity deserves its place among the stars." Mira looked out at Earth, scarred but unbroken, wrapped in the glow of jury-rigged shields and surrounded by the wreckage of both human and alien ships. They had been tested and had not been found wanting. The road ahead would be long and dangerous. The Dominion would return, stronger and angrier. But humanity would be ready. Because that's what humans did. They adapted. They survived. They stood together when it mattered most. The countdown had reached 0, but for humanity, it was just the beginning. Admiral Chen's sacrifice was honored across every nation. Yuki Tanaka's name was carved into monuments. And Dr. Mira Castellanos, who had heard the first whisper from the stars, watched as humanity took its first real steps into a larger universe. They were no longer alone. They were no longer primitive. They were part of something greater. And the galaxy would never be the same.